Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Lady Leadership Podcast. My name's Sam McIntyre, and I have the wonderful guest with me today, Anneli Blundell. Now, Anneli describes herself as a people whisperer, and she's obsessed with helping leaders decode the hidden dynamics that drive human behavior and better understand why people do what they do. We all need help with that. Welcome to the show, Anneli. Now, you're here to talk to me about a great new book that you've written called The Gender Penalty: Turning Obstacles into Opportunities for Women at Work.
Indeed. It's a big topic and I'm ready.
We're not there yet, are we?
That's right.
No, I just mean in terms of gender, we're not there yet.
Yeah,
exactly. All right. So tell me about the gender penalty and tell me what motivated you to write the book.
So I've been working as a coach, consultant, communication expert for the past 17 years. And in that time when I'm working one-on-one with leaders and I'm helping them build communication, influence, and impact in their world. And I noticed that the conversations I was having with women were quite different to the conversations I was having with men. You know, for men, it was more around building EQ. For women, it was more around building their personal brand. And so this whole concept of executive presence and gravitas and a sense of authority was something that women would get a lot of feedback on, that men wouldn't typically get the same level of feedback on. And I started, you know, it was really interesting to me because when I first started coaching way back when, you know, people would say, who's your target market? And of course, being a new coach, I would say, do you breathe? Excellent. You're my target market. You know, at the time, I hadn't quite figured that out. But what I noticed was there were so many people who said, I coach women. I'm a women's empowerment coach.
Right. Yeah.
And I just remember, you know, this was 17 years ago. It was very early on in the coaching industry. But even then, I remember thinking, why? Like, what's so wrong with all these women that all these people want to support and, you know, nurture women? Because in my world of work, you know, I came from the corporate space. I didn't feel like I needed extra help. I didn't feel like there was inequity. I didn't notice, more to the point.
Yeah.
Because it was there and it was rife. And when I look back now, I think, oh, yes, okay, I can see it clearly. But as a young woman in the workforce, I thought it was just me. I thought that's just how it was.
Yeah. It's funny that you should say that because I didn't see it either really until I was in my mid-30s. So I think that kind of early part, like your 20s, you're in the sort of early stages of your career, you're developing things. I worked in technology my whole career, which is very male dominated, but I did work in some spaces that did have sort of pockets of women. So I had, you know, great role models and nurturers, etc. But it wasn't until really that kind of, and, you know, I was progressively working my way up. But I think we were so also conditioned to kind of accept the status quo or accept, I mean, I was born in the 70s, raised in the 80s, you know, started work in the 90s. And, you know, when I first started work, we used to have to wear a dress or a skirt to work. Like, you know, so we were fairly conditioned, you might say, and you had to wear tights or stockings or etc. And so, you know, thinking about gender equality wasn't really kind of there was lots of rules, I think, or lots of unwritten rules for women, you know, more unwritten rules back then, but I don't think we've really sort of moved forward that far. And it's interesting to me what you say about fixing women, because I've done coaching with women as well and then had developed lots of women, and it was only through that I realized we can ask women to step forward, we can ask women to put their hand up and to shout out and all the rest of it. But if we don't change the system, and that system that is stopping women automatically, and that they, you know, feel like they have to smash through that glass system, you know, it's like we can work on women all you want, but that's not really the problem that needs to be solved.
Correct. And so in the book, I make a clear distinction between what we need to focus on and why. So the whole analogy around this book is that we're playing a game. Work is a game created by men, played by men, and we've all inherited it, right? So it was designed by men back in the day, and it was, but this was, you know, back in the ether where it was only men in the workforce, right? It made sense. So you made the game about the rules that everybody understood, because everyone had a wife at home and the wife looked after the children and the men went to work 24/7. Like, that was how it was. And we've all inherited these systems and structures, and it's actually no good for any of us at the moment. But what we've got is, we have now this system that's broken. And so we focus on the women because they're being overlooked, underestimated, spoken over, interrupted, ignored, for example. And we say, speak up, use your voice. And I say this, and I give women strategies to do this, and it's not enough. So we also have to look at why women aren't speaking up, or why they're being interrupted. Like, why do women have to do this work to be heard? What's going on in the structure of the system that is enabling that to occur? So in the book, I split it into 3 sections. First, what's the state of play? Why are we playing this game? Why are we still playing this game?
Yeah.
And why are women getting fouled on the field? You know, we're saying, come and play this game. Boop, you know, time out. You got it wrong.
You've done the wrong thing. Yeah. You've
Back
stepped
to
in
the
the wrong.
starting line.
Yeah.
Exactly. You know, no promotion for you. Why? What's going on?
I like that. No promotion.
No promotion for you. And in the second part, I'm looking at, how do we adapt to the play? How do we adapt on the field to the game at play? And this is really about giving women strategies to be able to navigate a gendered leadership landscape, to be able to understand what are the invisible rules, what are the obstacles that, you know, that women are facing that men aren't necessarily facing. And then the final piece is, how do we advance the game for good? Because what I say to men and women everywhere is that I'm all for marching for justice, 100%. You'll see me on the picket line. Yes, we need to march for change. And I can't wait for that result. So we're on the picket line marching for change because we need to change the system, but we also have to go back into the workforce, go back to that meeting and get spoken over and ignored.
Yeah.
So it's not enough to just expect the system to change. We have to be working on both fronts.
Couldn't agree with you more. Absolutely. I really liked your analogy in the book around, you know, women think it's a classroom and men think it's a sports field. And it really resonated with me around the different framing of that, and the framing of that for women and the framing of that for men. And I really loved that piece where you describe, you know, for women, like the classroom, I play by the rules, I want to cooperate, I share credit, I help others at a cost to myself, I do everything right. For men, for a sports field, it's I bend the rules, I want to compete, I take credit, I put myself first, I do the right things, I upsell my strengths. I mean, they're polar opposites. They really are. And it just made it like that page 33 of the book just made so much sense to me. I was like reading it going, oh yeah, this is so true.
Yeah. And it's so funny because you'll remember that my intro to that concept was a story from someone from one of my Women at Work workshops who said, you know, I talk about that in the workshops and it comes before morning tea. And at morning tea, as we were walking out, she said to me, that has completely changed my life. If we do nothing else, like, I am good to go right now. The epiphany I've just had around the whole idea of, I've been playing the game of work like it's a classroom. Like, if I just work hard enough, if I get enough qualifications, I have enough PhDs, you know, my good work should speak for itself. It does not. We have to assume it's table stakes. Of course, everyone's going to work hard. Everyone thinks that they're doing a good enough job that they'll be noticed. And sometimes you will be, but predominantly, if you are not making yourself visible beyond your good work, you are invisible, because men are playing the game differently. They're on the sporting field. How do you get on the sporting field when you're part of a team sport? You say to the coach, pick me, right?
Yeah,
I've been practicing and playing, and I've done push-ups and I've done all these things. I'm ready, coach. Pick me.
Yeah. I see my 12-year-old doing that at football, yelling at his coach, saying, I want to go back on. I want to go, like, if he's taken off, he'll take a moment and go, I want to go back on.
Yes. And so I talk to women about this concept, right, which comes from a wonderful book called Gender Speak from Suzette Hayden Elgin. And the point of this is, if men are on the field taking a step forward going, pick me, and women are in the classroom taking a step back going, they will pick me when they see my value, we're 2 steps apart straight away.
Yeah.
And, if we add on top of that the society's conditioning of men and women and how we are supposed to live into our gender stereotypes, for women, and this is one of the major penalties. If I were to summarize the 5 penalties into one overarching idea, it's you either need to be ladylike or leader-like.
Yes.
Because the workforce expects women to be ladylike, i.e. supportive, helpful, humble, nurturing, caring, like a woman. But when you stay in that space as a woman in the workforce, you're not taken seriously. So you go, all right, well, I'm going to take on all the advice I'm given. So speak up, be strong, be directive, be more authoritative. So I take on those new behaviors. So I fit the leader-like box. And all of a sudden, now I'm violating the stereotype of being a woman, and people see me as cold, difficult, demanding.
Yeah, can't win. Let's talk about the 5. So let's talk about the visibility piece, because that really resonated with me. And the one that particularly resonated with me was around meetings, and it was like, speak early in the meeting, speak every 10, 15 minutes, speak at the end of the meeting so that you're closing the meeting out so that people know. And I can tell you there's been so many times in meetings, because, I've had 30 years of being shut down, that I haven't spoken much, or unless I've really got something to say. And whereas it made me reflect that I've sat in so many meetings where men say basically nothing, or they just repeat what someone else said, but they're so visible. And so, we often have that thought of, well, I should only speak if I've got something important to say. And what really resonated with me in your book was speak anyway. Like, just find opportunities to speak like a man, because that's what they're doing. And so play that game, repeat what people say, it's very easy just to agree with someone in a meeting. Agree and say, that was a great point, Trevor. I really liked the piece around such and such. Because it is just, and I've been in, some of the most senior boardrooms in Australia. It is just a bit of a game, really. Yeah.
And, I give people strategies around this, because one of the first things women will say to me is exactly what you said. I only want to speak if I have something of value to say, right? So that is an issue for you if you are a reflective thinker, i.e. you're not thinking on your feet, you take time to process. So often by the time you come up with a good idea, the conversation's gone.
Yes.
Or you don't feel confident, or you don't feel there's space for you. So there's a million reasons why we might hold ourselves back. Plus we don't get space when we do put our voice in. Right?
Or you don't want to interrupt. You don't want to speak over people, which is hard when you're in those rooms, with 8 dominating men and maybe 2 or 3 women, and they're all having the conversation. And but they just talk over each other. So you need to just find the space. In your book, you said find the space.
Find the space and then hold the space. That's right. And so there's something in, when I say speak early, speak often, speak last, and then we come up against this hurdle of, I don't want to say anything if there's nothing useful to say. So I want to challenge your idea about, what do you think is a useful contribution? Because most people think it's about content, i.e. here's what I want to add to the conversation, or here's what I know about the stuff we're talking about. And I say there's another way to make a useful contribution that's about the process of the meeting, not just the content. For example, have you ever sat in a meeting that got derailed? Have you ever sat in a meeting where 2 people are clearly having their own conversation and it needs to be taken offline? Have you ever been in a meeting where someone clearly has the information that people need to hear, but people keep talking over them or interrupting them? So that's all process points. So anyone at any time, even someone who knows nothing about the content of what's going on in that conversation, can say, hey, I want to ask, Sharon, can you come into the conversation for a moment? It looks like you've got something to say.
Yeah.
Or I want to hear from Bob. I know he's been working on this project for 6 months. Bob, what's your contribution here? Or something like, I really love that we're having this conversation. I feel like it's overdue, and I'm excited about where we might go with this today. That's valid. All of that stuff is valid. What about, it sounds like we're going off topic here. We've got 3 more agenda points. Maybe we should take a vote. Do we want to spend more time here? Or do we want to park that and move on to the next items? People are desperate for someone to take charge in meetings.
Yeah. And I think often too often, you know, that those points get left to, and I've been in this room, right, get left to the kind of most senior person to kind of facilitate. So
yeah, but what's stopping any of us from doing it?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. And if you want to be more visible, I think you've got to get comfortable with doing that. I think it's like presenting. You get comfortable presenting by presenting. So you get comfortable speaking in meetings by speaking in meetings, or senior meetings by speaking up in senior meetings, and just having a view, showing that view. And like, you don't have to do it all the time as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I liken it to this idea of, do you remember, Sam, back in the day, not too far ago, but before the pandemic, before everyone was comfortable with Zoom video and Teams calls and all that sort of jazz, where we would be in the corporate setting and we would have, there'd be a number of people in the boardroom, let's say in the meeting room, physically live, and then we'd have people dialing in. Do you remember that? And when they dialed in, they would have to say their name. So when they joined, it would say, Anneli has joined the meeting. Do you remember that? So when we had those, you knew who was in the room. Now, if that didn't happen, the conversation would be with the people sitting in the room eyeballing each other. And if some voice from a random distance just sort of, you know, jutted into the conversation, it would feel like, oh, who's joining our meeting?
Yes.
So I think of it like this: when you speak, when you're one of the first to speak, you speak often, you're one of the last to speak, what you're saying is, hello, my name is Anneli, I'm joining the meeting.
Yeah, nice.
Because if you don't speak early enough, and I'm sure we've all had this happen, if we don't speak early enough in a meeting, it gets to the point where if you haven't said anything by the 3/4 of the way mark,
there's no point.
There's no point. And you feel like you're interrupting somebody else's meeting.
Yeah, I can very much resonate with this point. Very much. And in fact, I wish I knew this 10 years ago, because I think it would have impacted my career differently. Potentially, maybe not, right? We're all, what is meant for you will not pass you by, right? But I think it would have given me more confidence to speak up more in those scenarios.
And I think something else around that is, it's not just what my aim for the book is to move women's experience from something that feels personal to them. So this is what people say when they come out of my Women at Work workshops is, I thought it was just me. I'm so glad to hear that this is actually a gender thing, because I feel differently toward it now.
Yeah, it's not personal. And the men in those meetings aren't thinking anything about the fact that they let everyone listen to them dribble on for 10 minutes and no one really cares what it's talked about. But I think also what this does, so the subset of this is that this creates advocates for you and creates relationships for you within that business, which are really important, and then also allows follow up outside of that. So if you're in those meetings, say with people that you don't work with every day, and maybe they're in more senior levels, et cetera, in different parts of the organization, it then allows you to be visible by them, which I think is the really key piece, because that's what gets you the promotions, that gets you the extra job somewhere else or whatever. Yeah.
There's simple things like, and not everyone feels ready enough or steady enough in their career to take this on. But if you're sitting in a meeting and having a conversation and you're lost and you don't know what's going on, or you feel like, I don't understand that term, or this doesn't feel clear to me, most of the time we personalize and think it's just me. I must be stupid. I'm not following it. I'm not going to say anything, and just, that I get an epiphany about what's going on. And we're too scared to say, I'm a little lost here. Can we just backtrack? I want to understand this piece. Can you just restate that? Because I didn't follow. I guarantee the more you show courage in doing that sort of stuff, the more everyone else in the meeting goes, oh, thank God, because I'm lost as well.
Yeah.
And ironically, the more confident you look, because only confident people in a meeting are prepared to say, I'm lost. I don't know where we are. Please explain.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's good advice. Tell me then about the 5 penalties.
So the 5 penalties. Okay. communication. So this is around the idea that, again, women's voices aren't heard to the same extent that men's are. We're conditioned to take up space differently. So women tend to be interrupted, ignored, and all that kind of stuff, just like we talked about. There's confidence. So this is a really big one. We have this confidence conundrum where women appear with lower self-confidence because we've been conditioned by society that humility equals influence. So we don't want to appear too big for our britches. So we won't claim overconfidence. But the problem here is that if our brain associates confidence with competence. So if you show up with high confidence, you'll be seen to be highly competent.
Yes.
And vice versa.
We've seen lots of confident men be promoted who are not necessarily competent. And we've seen plenty of really competent women not be promoted.
Because they don't appear confident. And so this is
too confident.
Correct. Yeah. And so we really have to get better at understanding that confidence doesn't necessarily equate to competence. And right now, women are bearing the brunt of that because they show up in society displaying less confidence. So they really they're fighting an uphill battle with that. The third one is around boasting. So again, we don't like a woman who brags. Honestly, we don't like men who brag either, but we tolerate it from men. It just seems to be, you know, part and parcel of the male discourse. And we go, oh, that's Bob, who cares? But for women, we certainly don't like it. And one of the things I like to say to women is that, you know, we talked about visibility already, right? So we have to reframe boasting to boosting, because if we don't, we'll shy away from what we need to get the visibility, to be in the rooms, to get the promotions, to have the opportunities. So we have to think about that. And I can talk about some strategies that in a minute. But the fourth one is strength. So when women show any sort of strength, they're decisive, they're authoritative, they're assertive, it gets misrepresented as overly strong, i.e. aggressive, dominant, cold, ball breaker, whatever it is. So women really need to find a way to be able to hold their boundaries, to say no, to push back in a way that then doesn't create a perception that they're just an ice queen, or, you know, that they're
When you were talking about this, I'm like, it's know your boundaries, know where your boundaries are, know when people are. I've had plenty of men in the workplace try and cross boundaries with me, and I've said, you need to, you know, bad behavior, that type of thing. And I think there was something in your book about kind of calling this out as well. So that a woman would be more likely to talk to someone behind the scenes than call this behavior out.
Yes. So there's a story of the woman in the book who's in HR, and her boss was giving her feedback that she needs to be more assertive. He needs to see more direct authority from her in her role. Like, I need you to step up as a leader, is what he's saying.
Yes.
They're in a management meeting, and there's some poor behavior by one of the participants in there. And, you know, the boss shoots a knowing look at this woman, as in, you need to deal with this. And she gives the head nod. Yep, I'm on it. Outside that meeting, she pulls a troubled behavior person aside and has the one-on-one dialogue with him, you know, sorts it out. And she does that because she doesn't want to shame this person in the meeting. It's the first time they've had this conversation. So from her mind, she's doing the right thing. But her boss sees that as weak leadership because she didn't confront him in the moment.
Yeah.
And so she's
fascinating, isn't it, really?
Isn't it? And she said, I've been displaying authoritative leadership. I've been holding boundaries, holding people to account for 6 months. But because I do it in a way that I feel holds everyone's integrity, you know, I do it in a way that I'm comfortable with in my own leadership style, because it doesn't match his perception of what a leader should be, he's not recognizing my behavior.
I've been that woman. I've done that. Like I've seen someone misbehaving badly in a meeting, and then I've just said at the end, "Okay, can I catch you for 5 minutes?" and then talked about with them rather than calling them out in front of everyone. Absolutely.
Right. And this is because when it comes to communication, women are conditioned to accommodate, to elevate others, to be in connection with people. So we want to save face for the other person, right?
Yes.
And we tend to elevate them over ourselves. Whereas for men, it's that competitive environment, right? It's about elevating themselves. You think about it. How do you get picked for the team? It's got to be me. Think about me. Pick me.
I have also called out in a situation, I recall calling something out that I thought was a mistruth, but then it reflected poorly back on me in that moment. When someone said something and I was like, well, that's not true because of X, Y, Z, and everyone knew that was the case, right? And then, I was the bad person because it looks like I've gone them in the meeting.
Yeah, right. Now, I imagine if it was men having that conversation, it wouldn't have been.
Everyone would have just laughed.
Right. But because, see, you're violating the leadership, you're violating the ladylike norm there, because women are accommodating, they're amenable, they want to play nicey, right? So we're not confrontational, we don't upset people, we don't. Exactly. We're amenable in that space. So we wouldn't be expected to do that. And people go, oh, are you in a bad mood today? Like, what's wrong with you today, right? You're not being nice anymore.
Yeah.
And finally, for the listeners listening at home going, what's the fifth one? You haven't given us the fifth one. let's close.
I'm bringing out all my war stories and all my wounds.
Which is brilliant. But I can tell you, when I'm listening to a podcast and they say there's 3 key things and they give me 2, it drives me nuts. So the fifth one is the motherhood penalty. And this is the idea that, when women have children, that they're somehow less committed, whereas when men have children, they're more responsible. So women get treated differently when they have kids. I mean, it's obvious. They usually work part-time, they make different arrangements. They need different type of flexibility in order to do their work, all that sort of stuff. But I can tell you right now, the women who are working part-time are typically working practically full-time, but getting paid part-time. They are working 3 times as hard as everyone else because they know this stigma and they don't want to be seen as less than. So they are working harder than you can imagine. And they are uber productive.
Yeah.
I've had managers say to me, I would hire two part-time women to job share than 1 full-time person, because you would get 4 times the amount of work done.
Yeah,
seriously.
Absolutely. Yeah. I've had a man say to me, hire a woman with children, hire a single mum, because she's the most productive out of everyone.
And organized, and you just think about it, you've got so much to do. We also know that women do the bulk of the child caring, the elderly care, the house management, the housework, all that sort of stuff. So women don't have time to muck around. So you want something done, we'll get it done, because we have to get it done.
So what do we do about this, Anneli?
What do we do about this? Well, you can get the book. That would be a good start.
Well, I think the book has got lots of recommendations on what you can do in these situations and how you can handle those. So for the viewers, I've read the book and lapped it up and loved it. And I think there's some really great recommendations on how to handle these things. But let's talk about that for a little bit.
So there's 2 things that I focus on. One is all the strategies in the book around the adapting the play on the field. Like, what do I do if I get spoken over in a meeting? How do I say no to my boss? All that sort of stuff. All those strategies are in the book. But the second part is, how do we advance the game? This is the broader conversation. And this is where I want men involved. Everybody needs to be involved, because it's all of us against the inherited systems and the cultural conditioning that we're all a part of. And it doesn't work for all of us. Like, men also have a gender penalty. It's not in the book, but their penalty is they're expected to be strong and stoic and constantly working. And a man who is vulnerable, a man who cries at work, a man who wants to take paternity leave. I mean, these are things that are seen as career limiting moves, right? So we need to be able to bust these stereotypes for all of us, not just for women. So for me, it's a couple of things. It's, start where you are. we're not expecting you to change overnight, but start where you are. Share your stories about what's happening in the workplace. Share stories about, coming back from maternity leave or things that you were worried about. Talk to other men about your experiences that they won't have, because that's how we enroll people in these conversations. If you're a manager of a woman, if you're a man or female, doesn't matter if you're a manager of a woman, but it helps if you're a man and don't necessarily have access to this, ask about her experiences.
Yes.
Ask about
yeah,
her
that's
journey.
exactly right. Seek to understand.
Correct. Seek to understand. Tell me what the experience was like. Tell me what I might not be seeing as a man who hasn't had maternity leave or whatever the case is, right? Just seek more information. And another thing for women is, it's two more things. One is to challenge the norms. Don't go in assuming it's just you or assuming that it's just the way things are. If you see lots of meetings and they're all men and they're all senior and you're doing a town hall and you've got a panel of men talking about blah, you can ask the question, where are the women?
Yes.
Where are the women on this panel?
Yeah.
Where are the women on this committee? Where are the women on this project? Just ask the question. If everybody asks the question.
If everyone asks the question, then, that you have to do something about it. And, sometimes the women can get a bit tired of kind of always asking, or, or you've got to be brave to ask as well.
Yes.
Yeah. And it can get hard, can't it?
Absolutely. And this is why I really want to encourage us to be sharing stories so that men can come into this and feel invited into this, to go, wow, this doesn't feel great for any of us. Hey, how can we do this together? The other thing too for women though is, if you are, starting to ask these questions or challenging the norms and the stereotypes, you may face backlash, right? And so, for example, I've got a story in the book of a woman who gave some feedback to a gentleman who was speaking over her in a meeting, took him aside, had a cup of coffee, nice kind of environment, just to say, hey, I've just noticed in our conversations with team, with suppliers and whatnot, that you have a tendency to speak over me and dominate the conversation. I just wanted to, flag that and see if we could approach this in a different way. He was furious. Didn't talk to her for 2 days. Silent treatment for 2 days. This is called backlash, right?
Yeah.
And she came to our coaching sessions. She's like, oh my God, I can't handle this. This is awful. I never meant to cause this issue. I'm just going to apologize. I'm going to take it back. And I said, no. Just sit in it.
Yeah.
Just sit in it. This is backlash. He might be processing. He might be trying to figure out if it's true. Like, just give him some space, but hold your ground, because this is backlash. People are going to be forced to, look in the mirror and hear things that maybe they're not aware of, or they don't want to believe, and people need time. After those 2 days, he came back to her and he said, I'm sorry. I think you're right. I've spoken to my wife about it and she agrees with you, and I'll try and do better.
Wow.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. And kudos to him.
Kudos to him. Yeah.
For doing that.
Yeah. How can individuals become more aware of their own biases then, and contribute to dismantling the gender parity in work lives?
For me, it's about education. So I am obsessed with human behavior, what makes people tick. I listen to any podcast that talks about human behavior, the lived experience of minorities, lots of audio books. So for me, it's really about education, because the whole thing with a bias is you don't know you've got it, right?
Yes.
That's the whole unconscious piece of unconscious bias.
Yeah.
So how do you know what you don't know? You don't always know, but if you can surround yourself with trusted people and create an environment, like I, for example, might run a training and be at the front of the room and say, look, I'm learning about pronouns. I'm trying to do it right. Please forgive me if I muddle it up, and I'm open to feedback because I want to grow. So you can start conversations like that. You can invite people in your teams and workplaces to say, hey, I'm really on board with this, but I'm an imperfect ally right now. I'm not necessarily getting it right. So give me feedback.
Yeah.
And do your own work. Read, talk to people, watch documentaries, do things to expose yourself to the lived experience of others, because that alone will completely change the frame with which you see the world.
I think that's nice. It's about being curious, isn't it, really? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Are you seeing some promising trends or shifts in attitudes and policies that give you hope that we're starting to shift the dial on gender parity for the future?
I am, because what I'm seeing is, society has a much bigger voice than it ever used to have, thanks to social media and Twitter and whatnot, right? So there is power in the social movement. And so people collectively are demanding more. And so what we see now is companies trying to scrabble to catch up and say, okay, we need a policy around diversity. We need a paternity leave and a maternity leave. And we need all these things. And so they're doing the right thing. They work to get the policies in place. For example, a lot of companies now, progressive companies, have paternity leave. So men can take leave when they become fathers. Brilliant. Yeah. We don't see the same take-up rates for men as we do for women. So what we're seeing now is we have a gap between policies and daily practices.
Yeah. Yep. Unwritten.
Okay.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
But, this is a culture change.
Yeah. And you just need that shift, don't you?
That's right. But we have to start somewhere. And I am buoyed by what I am seeing is coming into the corporate space now, with hiring policies and competency frameworks, and we need at least male-female representation on the hiring panels, and all that sort of stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I'm seeing the right conversations being had and actions taking place, and it's now the work to shift the cultures within these organizations to catch up to the frameworks.
Oh, I think that's good framing, actually. Yeah, I like that. You've written a second little book, which we should mention as well, and it is little in size compared to the gender penalty, which is When Men Lead Women, Navigating the Facts, Fears and Frustrations of Gender Equality as a Male Leader. So this book is for men.
Yes, this book is for men.
And how they can support women, essentially.
Correct.
Yeah.
You're right. And it is a pocketbook. So it's a shorty. It'll take you about an hour to read. And I actually wrote that halfway through writing the gender penalty. And I wrote it because I was having so many corridor conversations with male leaders.
Yeah.
As part of my Women at Work programs and my diversity dialogues programs, and having so many conversations with men who would, in confidence say to me, I'm all for this. I'm a supporter, but honestly, Anneli, I don't get it. Like,
I don't get it, or I don't know what to do.
I don't get it. I don't know that I fully understand it. I went to the same high school. I feel like, correct. I feel like we've had the same opportunity. I don't see the barriers. I'm sure they're there, but I don't see it. And I don't know what to do. Yes. Because men right now, what I'm noticed is they're confused about their role, right? So you open the door for a woman, you get slapped in the face. You don't open the door for a woman, you get slapped in the face. Men are confused. We don't know what to do. What do you want from us, right? How do we step in here?
Well, different women in that situation would want different things.
Exactly. So men are confused and they're concerned and they're worried about doing the wrong thing, and they're worried about making it worse and appearing sexist if they ask questions to legitimate questions that they have in their mind. So I wrote this book as a way to say, hey, we've got men at different levels of willingness to step into this movement or this conversation. You might find yourself anywhere on this ladder, from, saboteur to supporter. And if you are genuinely interested, here are some questions you might be holding in your mind. Like, does the best person for the job really get the job? Like, what if it's a man? Or what do we do with that? What if I don't see the problem? All these questions that feel unsafe to ask in a group.
Yeah.
And so I answer a number of those questions, and I give men some quick strategies at the end for how to arm themselves, how to equip themselves and educate themselves to get into this conversation, because seriously, without them, nothing is going to change.
Oh,
nothing
completely. I completely agree. Nothing is going to change. We need the men to help, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly. And I really do
change the
think,
game.
correct. I mean, this is better for everyone. One of my male coaching clients said to me, he was on paternity leave for 6 months with his daughter when she was 3. And he said, I've learned more about leadership in these last 6 months than I have on every leadership program I have been on. And I'm an executive. I've done them all.
Yeah. Trying to negotiate with 3-year-olds.
With 3-year-olds.
Person to up their game.
Exactly. So, like, what are the men missing out on when it's a
Yeah.
career limiting move to stay home with children?
Yeah.
You know, these sorts of things. This is not good for anybody.
I mean, there's stats around having more women in the workforce actually is greater for the whole economy and could increase, each percentage point increases economically beneficial for all. So, well, it's so good, Anneli, to have you on the show. What would be your final recommendation for listeners?
My final recommendation is start where you are, know that you're not alone, and just take one step at a time. Just one step at a time.
Yeah, perfect. And get some women around you to help you, I think, as well. I would add to that, who you can talk to about.
Yes.
Yeah. So if you're feeling a bit disheartened, then find a community of women that you can share, and you won't go far, and you'll find someone that's had a similar problem, and also options to help as well.
And actually, that part of the book is a digital bonus kit. So I created downloads that people could use to help socialize the learning. So we know, socialized learning is sticky learning, right? So if I want to read a chapter and go, oh, amazing, and I call a friend and say, hey, I've just learned this thing about the classroom and the sporting field, let's chat about it. You learn at a different level. So I created a number of digital resources that they're in the book, but one of them is the Chick Chat Club, otherwise known as a book club, that has a whole bunch of questions after each chapter that you can use if you want to, get a group of gal pals together and go through this chapter by chapter and really deep dive into these concepts and share strategies and things that work and all that kind of stuff, so that it's not just you. Beautiful.
I really like that. It's great to get a bunch of women together and go through it. What's the best way, Anneli, for people to get in contact with you?
My website, anneliblundell.com. If you're watching this, you can see it on the screen, yada, yada, right there. Otherwise, it's just my name, anneliblundell.com. Everything is on the website, or you can link up with me on LinkedIn under the same name.
Nice. And I really liked, you made a quote in the book around normalizing the power of women's voices. And you talked about, I think, when you get on a plane, hearing a woman's voice come across saying that she's the captain of the plane.
Yes.
Very good. Let's all normalize women in power, women's positions in power, and so that people just accept it and don't get a fright.
This is going to sound strange, Sam, but I want women to be unremarkable in that.
No, I know.
I don't want us to say, oh, a female pilot.
Yes, a female pilot.
I just want us to go, a pilot.
Yeah, a pilot. And do you know what? I always say we'll know we've got there when mediocre women are running large corporations.
That's exactly what I say. 100%.
There's plenty of mediocre men running large corporations.
100%.
I think you have to be an exceptional woman to be running a large corporation at the moment. So,
well, that's what all the research says. You don't get there by working, you have to work twice as hard and be twice as good to get through the minority status. So we know that's actually what's happening. So when we do see a bunch of mediocrity at the top, definitely know we've made it.
You can get there. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. I loved reading the book. I highly recommend this to any woman embarking on her career. I think it's a game changer for how you turn up and show up, and then how you think about how others are turning up and showing up as well. So, well done. Beautiful book.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Sam.
Thank you.